Hi there, book friends! I'm Addie, and this is Books and Tea Time, even though we're in a new location and we have a guest star. I am house sitting slash pet sitting for my aunt and uncle. This is one of their dogs. And she is super cute and adorable, and she does not want me to be filming right now. Milo is gonna be super jealous, so we're not gonna tell him that I'm here. I'm here to finally do the intro clip to my Oathbringer reading vlog. So welcome to my Oathbringer reading vlog, third book in the Stormlight Archives. I have been doing these reading vlogs where I read these chunky fantasy books, and they are filled with spoilers. So if you haven't read Oathbringer and you haven't read the first two books, The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, pause this video, save it for later, and come back later on if you plan on reading this in the future. I highly recommend it for fantasy lovers, and even if you're like not super into fantasy and you don't read it a lot but you're willing to give it a chance, this is a great, brilliant series. It's one of the best written, best worlds, best everything. I love this series so much. So I'll also have a card to that playlist if you have read these books and you want to watch. I'll have the first two installments, but today is the Oathbringer vlog. I'm also obviously filming this way after I finished. I finished this book in like the second week of October. It's now October 27th. It's no secret, I have been really bad at filming recently. I'm sure at least one person has noticed. And it's kind of just a combination of a couple different things. It's like nothing bad, but for one thing, I was reading this book and filming and editing this content, which does take up a lot of time. I wasn't reading anything else alongside this book, so it got to the point where like I wasn't reading anything else, so I couldn't really record reading vlogs or anything like that, or like other type videos. So I did the Finally Fall book tag because I just desperately needed content. So if you want to see that, I'll have a card to that video. It was really fun, atmospheric, and also starting a new job. I started a new job in September. I mentioned it in a couple different videos. I work at a library now. I love it. It's so fun, very suited to my personality, my likes, but obviously that transition and like getting used to my new schedule, things like that, it's been a time, but I want to get back to filming, and I'm glad to be filming right now, even though I'm not in my usual space. Welcome to the vlog, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of it. I am going to now film part 5 and my outro, but so I'll see you in this outfit and on this day. At the end of the video, I'll send you back in time to past Addie, who has not yet finished and is just beginning this wild ride, and I can't wait to share with the rest of my Stormlight fans here on YouTube my reactions to this book. So yeah. Hi there, friends. It's time for my very first Oathbringer check-in, and first and foremost, let's just take a moment to appreciate the thickness of this book. I'm obviously flying through this first one because we have just concluded part 1. We're on page 326. I did not read the first set of interludes yet, but I wanted to be better about updating you after every part this time, so I stopped myself, I controlled myself, and we're here to talk about part 1. But first and foremost, let's just talk generally about this book and some of the information. Every book, the prologue, the first chapter, the prologue, takes place on the same day, and that is the day of Gavilar's murder, or his assassination, like years before the present timeline of these stories. And in this book, the prologue is from Ishani's perspective. She is the female shard bearer for the Parshendi. We actually see a lot of her in Words of Radiance in the interludes, and so we're basically following her on the day of Gavilar's murder, and we get a little bit on her history. She is an explorer, and her dream was to explore the areas of Roshar, and she is the one who first discovers or encounters human beings. She is wandering around and accidentally comes upon Gavilar, and Gavilar wants to speak with her, and so they have a conversation, and in that conversation he basically tells her that he wants to bring back the gods of the Parshendi. and that is a really ominous thing for them, because I think we know vague information about the history, but we know that it wasn't good for them. They were basically enslaved and tortured by their gods, just as the Parshmen were enslaved and tortured by humans. So there's a lot of questions and mystery that still lingers around this moment, but basically we know a little bit now about why Gavilar was murdered, because Ashani is the one who tells like the leaders in her cohort what Gavilar says, and they decide that they have to murder him. So it wasn't a malicious act that they just wanted to kill him, and they are, or at least Ashani is saddened by the fact that she doesn't have the opportunity for this treaty between the Parshendi and the humans, and she feels like it's just a betrayal that had to be carried out, which is really strange. So that's the prologue. We know a little bit more about why Gavilar was murdered now. Additionally, every book thus far, you have one character who you get flashbacks from their past. In book 1, it was Kaladin. In book 2, it was Shallan. And in book 3, it's Dalinar. We get so many references to his like prestige and his becoming of the Blackthorn and being this great warrior and this great soldier, but we don't see any of that, because obviously he's, I think, in his like late 40s, early 50s in the books. So we're seeing a lot of young Dalinar and seeing him in the past, and it's honestly, it's hard to read sometimes. Like, he was not the best, and at the same time I'm interested in that because it's kind of cool to see this other side of Dalinar and compare and contrast Dalinar that we know versus this younger, violent, deeply troubled person. I do not dislike Dalinar's character. I like him and he's interesting, but he's definitely my least favorite. And obviously because we're getting his backstory, we're getting his flashbacks, we're getting a lot more of him in this book. I guess we'll attack this by perspective for now, because I think that's the best way to go about this. So we're gonna start with Kaladin, because that's gonna be a lot swifter. But basically at the end of Words of Radiance, Kaladin leaves this like mysterious city that I'm not gonna bother pronouncing. So Kaladin leaves and he goes back to his hometown of Hearthstone because he wants to warn them that the Everstorm is gonna come back and that it's gonna like destroy everything and transform the Parshmen into Voidbringers. He's late. He basically misses it and the Everstorm hits, and so he's expecting to find that his town has been completely destroyed and everyone's dead. But he finds out that they're not dead, they survived because the Parshmen were transformed, but they immediately ran away and escaped instead of attacking. So they suffered some injuries and some destruction to the town as a result of the Everstorm, but a lot of people are still alive and his parents are still alive. So he has this reunion with his mom and dad, and there's obviously some tension because the guards of Roshon's army think that he's a slave because of the brands on his head. But then he whips out his shard blade and everything's fine. He's like, anybody got questions? Here's my shard blade. I'm a radiant. Woo! And it's great. I love it. I just love the power play of someone whipping out their shard blade and just being like, boom. It's such a power move and I approve of it 110%. It's amazing. So not only does he see his parents again, but he finds out that they've been busy, kind of, and he has a baby brother. So his other brother, Tien, dies when he's enlisted in the army, and that is a big issue for Kaladin and him coping with that reality and feeling like he failed his brother in book 1 and honestly throughout all of the books. But his parents had another baby, so he has another brother that is alive, and he cries when he sees him, and it's a beautiful moment. After that, he gives chase to the escaped Voidbringers, and he finds them and is very confused because they have changed form, but they're not all in storm form or even war form. So they can speak his language really well. They can speak Alethi, whatever it's called, and they're like trying to imitate their culture. They're like trying to play this card game, and he like lets them take him as a captive, and then he teaches them a bunch of stuff. He teaches them how to like build a fire, survive in the wilderness, how to fight, etc., etc., while they are traveling to this unknown location. And at the end of part 1, Kaladin arrives at this city and finds that the Parshmen have completely taken over the city. Like some like 50,000, I think, Parshmen are taking over the city. They've like enslaved all the humans, put them in these pens, and it doesn't seem like they really know instinctively what's next. There are voidspren that are guiding them and that guided them to this location, so it's not as though there's a collective understanding of what's going to happen, it seems, among the Parshmen, Parshendi, Voidbringer, Listener. I don't even know what to call them anymore and what the distinction is, but they're not really Parshmen anymore. Then the rest of our perspectives are back in this new city as they're trying to build and things are going on. So I guess we can focus first on Shalyn, who is continuing to practice her light weaving, and she's really struggling. Her and Pattern are going through it right now, because at the end of Words of Radiance we find out that she not only killed her father but also had to kill her mother, because her mother kind of turns on her and tries to kill her when she finds out that she has surge binding abilities. And so Pattern materializes as a blade and she kills her mother. And so she has this deep hate for the blade, but Pattern is the blade, and so she's trying to make all these like distinctions and compartmentalize, but it very quickly can fall apart when things don't fit into those boxes. So she's really struggling with her relationship with Pattern, but she's also struggling just with her abilities and her relationship with herself. So she has her personality, Shalyn. She has Veil, which is the dark-haired, dark-eyed persona that she puts on with light weaving to infiltrate the ghost bloods and to investigate and be all sneaky. And then she adopts a third personality, or a third persona as well, named Radiant, and it's basically Shalyn with Jasna's personality, and it allows her to use her shard blade without completely freaking out mentally. But again, these categories loosely fall into each other. Her and Adolin are continuing to flirt, but it's cute, but it's not her and Kaladin, so I'm just like, whatever, I don't really care. But one thing that does really, really suck is that Adolin and Shalyn are talking, and she finds out that Kaladin is actually the one who killed her brother, Hilarin, and that's definitely gonna put a damper on things in their relationship, I think. So she finds out that Amaram didn't kill her brother, Kaladin did, and then he took the shard blade. Amaram took the shard blade from Kaladin. So we knew that, but Shalyn did it and now she knows, so that sucks a lot. The other main plot thread that kind of ties Shalyn, Adolin, and Dalinar's perspective together in this part is that at the end of Words of Radiance, Adolin kills Sidious. We love it, love to see it. But at the beginning of this book, someone else mysteriously dies in the exact same way that Sidious did, and then we're basically finding out through Shalyn's Veil sneakage and her and Adolin investigating that there is this spren that has been mimicking all of the acts of violence that humans carry out in the city. So Shalyn stabs someone in the hand, and then the next day someone who looks like that person also gets stabbed in the hand. In addition to that, because Sidious is dead, his wife Iali, don't know how to say her name, decides that Amaram is now going to be High Prince of her house. So that little snake weaseled his way to the top, and Dalinar and Alan are like pissed about it, but they can't really do anything about it, so they're like, whatever. Let's talk about Dalinar for a second. First of all, he and Navani get married, which does not make the Ardents happy because they're technically like siblings, because she married Gavilar in the past, but I don't know. They're not really related, so it doesn't bother me, but maybe it bothers other people, I don't know. But they get married, really cute, love the ceremony. They're actually married by the Stormfather. But we're getting these snippets of Dalinar's past, which basically show us that he sucked real bad when he was younger. So on the one hand, he is incredibly broody and hashtag sad boy because Gavilara gets to marry Navani and he doesn't. So every time he's around her, he's really sad and beat up inside because he can't have her. And I think he has a lot of tension with his brother, like, he gets everything, but I do all the work kind of a situation. And, like, I get it, but at the same time, he literally brutally murders so many people because we're following the time period before the 10 kingdoms of Alethkar are united. And so basically Dalinar, Gavilar, and Sidious are using force and war and destruction to bully all of these high princes under Gavilar's rule to unite them. And so the beginning of that series of years, that time period, is basically them just brutally murdering like hundreds upon thousands of people. And we see the scene where Dalinar gets his Shardblade Oathbringer. It's kind of implied that he kills a child because the child picks up his father's Shardblade and says, "You can't have my dad." And then like 2 pages later, Dalinar's like, "Well, I have the Shardblade." So I think it's implied that he killed that 7-year-old child or whatever. So that's messed up in and of itself. Dalinar in the present is trying to do something similar, but he's trying to unite all of the kingdoms of Roshar, not just Alethkar. He's trying to unite everybody against the Voidbringers by talking to them via Spanreed, and it is not going well because he's not using his normal tactics and everyone expects him to just come in guns a-blazing, shard blades ablazing, and kill everybody, and he doesn't do that because he's trying to grow as a person, but no one believes him, so he kind of dug himself into that hole. But it's not going well. The only person he got to agree is Taravangian. Taravangian shows up and is like, "Yeah, sure, this is a great idea. I would love to be part of your little coalition of Roshar." Okay, I randomly lost the last 5 minutes of footage that go to this clip, so just for the sake of continuity, the only 2 things that you really need to know that are important are that Dalinar starts to get his memories back and remembers his wife's name is Evie, and also that Shallan confronts one of the Unmade in the underground of Urthuru, and she scares it away with her light weaving. So that's the end of part 1, and now on to the first set of interludes. Welcome back. We are here to do our first set of interludes, and in this first interlude we're following a man named Pulley who's traveling collecting wood from destroyed buildings and ships that the Everstorm completely obliterated, and also we are getting this foreboding message that he has been waiting for this tragic moment that his ancestors told him would come when people would come from the origin from the island of Amia. So not sure, but foreboding stuff going on here, stuff to watch out for. Next, we are with an ardent named Alista who is trying to find a quiet place to read her spicy romance novel and is continually interrupted, and at the end she's finally interrupted by one of her peers who needs her help translating a section of Dawn Chant, and they are doing this for a patron who is particularly committed to having this done quickly and effectively. Finally, we get to see Venli, who is in the chasms being led by a voidspren named Ulam, and they find Ashani's body. She is dead, and Venli is devastated, but she also finds out that the Voidspren led her here simply to find Ashani's plate and had no particular interest in helping her find her sister's body and see if her sister was still alive. Just the beginning of some tensions Venli feels throughout this book. Hi there, friends. It's Wednesday evening and I have more updates. So I was on the phone with my good friend Marissa today, and if you've watched my previous Stormlight vlogs, then you know she and I are Stormlight fans. We are absolutely hands-on into it, and she's all caught up, so I text her regularly with like my updates and my reactions to stuff, and so we talk like once a week usually on the phone because she lives in Virginia and I live in Pittsburgh. We spent an hour and 45 minutes today talking on the phone about Oathbringer and Words of Radiance and just things in general, and it was so pleasant, so fun, and it just got me in the mood to talk about it, so that was really exciting. I am currently on page 440, chapter 43, We are making progress, swift progress. I'm like halfway through part 2, and when I last updated you, I had just finished part 1, so I wanted to come on and give you some of my thoughts so far. And first off, one of the most interesting things, one of the differences so far about this part is that we are getting perspectives of Bridge 4. So we're getting Shallan, Jasna, and Dalinar as like our normal parts, but we're also getting to see the perspective of different members of Bridge 4. So we got some time with Sigzil, I think is how you say his name, Sigzil. We got time with Rock. Oh my god, and his family finally arrived at the Shattered Plains, and it is so sweet and amazing, and I loved it so much. And we recently just got some time with Teft, who is struggling with an addiction to like this thing called fire moss, which to me seems like some kind of like equivalent to like a narcotic or drug addiction that he's dealing with. And so that has been a really big problem for him over the past few weeks now that he has a steady income again and the temptation is there. So I really love that we're getting perspectives from the Bridgemen because one, they're really interesting side characters that I've come to love, but also an interesting thing is seeing Kaladin through their eyes and seeing the parts about Kaladin that they admire and the friend that they see in Kaladin, but also like ways that they like see his flaws, you know, because I think a lot of times Kaladin is just like such like a great character. You root for him, you feel bad for him, and you immediately are attached to him from book 1, like chapter 1, Way of Kings, when you first meet him. But it's also important to recognize that like he's human and he has flaws, and even though you see that a little bit with him and Syl and their tension in Words of Radiance, it's kind of cool to see the other Bridgemen challenging him and keep pushing him in the right direction. Like there's this moment where he and Sigzil are talking to a female scout who wants to join this like Windrunner cohort situation. So there's this interesting moment where Kaladin is being sexist and kind of questioning and assuming like, oh, why do you want to be doing this radiant surge binding stuff? And Sig is kind of like, dude, what are you doing? Like, shut up. Don't be like that, you know. There are other female radiants and, you know, that's an outdated tradition. So, like, Kaladin still has some work to do and he still has some things in his consciousness that are ingrained that he has to push back against. In addition, Jasna is back, baby. And, oh my gosh, I really love Jasna. She's a great character. I love her so much. I love everything about her. But man, can she be a biatch sometimes. Like her and Shallan immediately first meeting, there's so much tension because while Jasna's gone, while she's in Shadesmar, Shallan undergoes this huge transformation, right? And like she's learning so much about herself, about her light weaving, and she has to do so much on her own, and she accomplishes such great things, and now she's a Radiant. But Jasna doesn't see a lot of that, but at the same time, Jasna recognizes that there's still stuff that Shallan needs to work on, but like the tension between them and their arguments and just it's interesting, but it's also difficult to read at times because I love Shallan so much. So immediately when Jasna is like scolding her or correcting her, I want to be mad at Jasna, but then at the same time everything that she's saying makes sense and she's not picking a fight with Shallan just to pick a fight with her, you know? Like she's guiding Shallan still with like positive like mentorship in mind, but she does it in her own Jasna way that's very not cold but also not warm, you know? But at the same time, I love that Jasna's back. I love her scholarly perspective on everything. I love her unfiltered, like unapologetic presence that she takes up in every room, in every scene that she's in. She is there and she knows that she belongs there and she will not let anyone let her feel or be told otherwise. Her and Kaladin have already butt heads a lot, but I'm also so glad to finally see her and Dalinar in the same space because they have a very good relationship, but it's a relationship that was built off page, like off screen. I love the way that Brandon Sanderson characterizes Jasna. There's like enough vagueness in her character that she is not identified as or categorized on page under any particular sexuality, but I do feel like Jasna's ace, and I really love that, and I love seeing that representation in fantasy, and love seeing it and just experiencing Jasna as a young, beautiful, eligible woman who is allowed herself and who is allowed by her society to a certain extent to exist in her own realm outside of the traditions of marriage and courtship and relationships, and that's really beautiful and I love it. So I hope that that doesn't change and Brandon Sanderson allows her to continue on this natural path and to be an asexual character. I love that. Thinks it's super cool. In addition, something that has started happening in part 2 is Dalinar realizes that he can share his visions and like replay them and bring other people in them during the high storms. So what he started doing is going into the visions and bringing in the monarchs from across the world that have been arguing with him and using those visions kind of to attract their support and persuade them to agree. So he starts with Queen Fen from Thalana, and then he brings in, oh my god, this is such a good scene, this just happened, but he brings in Gox, who has his name changed, but he is the young boy in the interludes of Words of Radiance who becomes the prime of Azir, I think. And if you've read Edge Dancer, you know that Lift is just on her way back after kind of having her own personal growth moment. And Dalinar brings Gox into this vision and they're having this heated discussion, this debate, and then Lift shows up, which is like absolutely unheard of. The Stormfather is so mad because he's like, she's not allowed to be in here. I didn't invite her. How did she get in here? What the heck? And she shows up and she calls Dalinar old. And I love her. I said this in my Goodreads review, but if I could be friends with any Stormlight character, it would be Lift. She's always hungry. She can metabolize food into Stormlight, which is the coolest thing ever. I still don't know how she can do it. I'm assuming we're going to learn more about it in the future. But she's an edge dancer, and her friend's name is Wendell, and she's younger. I think she's probably like 13 or 14, but it's really confusing because she thinks any number above 10 is unlucky, so she refuses to be older than 10. But I love her so much. She shows up and calls Dalinar old, and I'm just like, yes. And then Gox asks her, should I trust this guy? And she says,
no, his butt is too nice. Old guys shouldn't have nice butts. It means you spend way too much time swinging swords and punching people. You should have an old flabby butt. Then I trust you.
It's so good. I love it. Additionally, something about Shallan is that she investigated the unmade being, and so she's rewarded by Mraize, who is the leader of the Ghost Bloods, and he gives her information about her brother, Hellerin, and we find out that he was actually he was an apprentice skybreaker under Darkness, who we also meet in Words of Radiance interludes and in Edge Dancer, and he was like trying to prove himself and working his way up supposedly to become a skybreaker, and that's where he got his shard blade, and that's also why he was trying to kill Amaram and why he eventually falls to Kaladin. So lots of interesting things there, still some questions, still some mysteries, but I'm probably gonna go downstairs and continue reading, although I also have a video to edit. So we'll see. Peace out. Good night. Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Hello. Do you wanna go for a walk? Friends, I have a cup of tea in my narwhal mug, and we're here to have a calm, relaxing Saturday morning chat because I've got a bunch of updates as far as Oathbringer goes. I finished part 2 this morning, so I've got Stormlight updates, but also some other life updates and just little things to show off. So let's start with that, shall we? You probably saw on the B-roll last night, Alexander and I went out to dinner and got some food together, some drinks, and we're just kind of enjoying each other's company. So we went out to eat, but there was like an hour wait at the restaurant that we went to, so we stopped across the road at the Half Price Books. First and foremost, I got Pretty Deadly, which is a graphic novel on my like spooky season TBR. I made a whole video talking about all the books I want to read and video or vlog ideas that I have. If you haven't seen that, I'll have a card, but I really love that video, setting the tone for fall, for spooky season, and this was only $5 at Half Price Books, so I just felt like I had to grab it so that I have it on hand. Cover's amazing. And then this is Criminal. This hardback, chunky, fantasy, glorious book was only $10. And that is Upon a Burning Throne by Ashok K. Banker. I have heard endless praises from so many booktubers, Jessie, Starla, and speak so highly of this series, and I want to make an effort to definitely get this in early in 2022, hopefully, if I don't get to it this year. So I had to grab it. I mean, $10? Are we kidding me? $9.99. What? That's criminal. This is criminally underpriced. Let's get to what you're really here for, which is the Oathbringer's thoughts, the Oathbringer reactions. I am on part 3, officially. I mentioned that we get some Bridge 4 perspectives in part 2, and interestingly enough, we are getting a couple chapters. We get a couple chapters from Moshe's perspective, and if you remember, he kind of like betrays Kaladin in Bridge 4 at the end of book 2 because he wants to assassinate Elokar, because Elokar basically imprisoned his grandparents and they just died and wasted away in prison. So he wanted to kill Elokar, and he was helping Graves, who was working for the diagram. And in Moshe's first chapter, Graves and all the people that Moshe was with are assassinated and murdered by fused, aka Voidbringers, aka Parshendi, who have like the storm form or who have been changed by the Everstorm to be a little more malicious and have Void's breath. That was a long way of saying that they show up and they kill everyone Moshe's with, and they basically spare his life and take his shard blade and his shard plate in exchange for his life, and they take him back to Revelar, which is the place Kaladin was at, and the new city that the Parshendi and the listeners, everyone, Parshmen, they've claimed as their city, and they're preparing for their attack on Kholinar there. So they take Moshe there, and he becomes a slave, and he's like working with a bunch of other people. He meets the Parshmen who Kaladin was hiding with, and they're being punished for like hiding a spy, even though they didn't know that Kaladin was a Radiant spy. And so it's kind of full circle. Moshe is now again a slave, and he's hearing all of the stuff about Kaladin. So it's kind of cool to get Moshe's perspective, and he like confronts one of the fused and kind of tells them that he doesn't feel like he feels what they're doing is justified by like attacking humans and trying to take over, but at the same time he wants vengeance himself. So he kind of comes to an understanding, it seems, with the Voidbringers, but then we don't get much more from his perspective. Shalyn decides that she wants to go on the trip with Kaladin and Elokar and Adolin, their like secret mission to Kholinar to open the Oathgate and like regain power of Kholinar from the inside. She decides that she's going to convince Elokar, and she does convince Elokar to let her go because she wants to run from her problems, essentially. In other news, Jasna, we get literally like 2 chapters from Jasna's perspective. I wanted a little bit more, but like I'll take what I can get at this point. And we meet her friend Ivory formally. There's like 2 sentences about him in Words of Radiance. He takes on like full human size around Jasna when it's just the 2 of them. So that was kind of interesting to read about like him as like human size interacting with Jasna. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this, but we found out at the very beginning of part 2 that Jasna is an Else Caller, so that's one of the Radiant Orders that we didn't know about before. So we know that she's an Else Caller. We're getting these small, like 2-sentence tidbits about Jasna's past that's really interesting. First, when Amaram shows up, we realize they have some tension in history because Navani and Gavilar a long time ago wanted her to court and marry Amaran. So, but she obviously does not like him, and they have like this tense moment. And also, there's a couple slight, very quick references to a period when Jasmine was a child where she was like a lunatic, or when she suffered from serious lunacy, mental health problems, and we don't get a lot of information about it, but it's referenced a couple different times. What's going on with Kaladin is basically he's training a bunch of apprentice windrunners, because I don't know if this applies to all of the orders or if it's just windrunners, but when Kaladin is around other people in Bridge 4 and other people that he like trusts and his soldiers, they can use Stormlight and they can kind of mimic some of his abilities. They're not full radiance, they're like apprentice radiance, but when he's like physically around them, they can use the power. So that's kind of interesting. He's been training all of Bridge 4 and taking in new members and teaching them to use their wind running abilities, and he's going to use some of them to help on this trip to Kholinar, trying to open the Oath Gate and figure out what's going on, because Kholinar has basically gone dark and they can't contact anyone there and they're not sure what's going on. So that's that. As far as the Dalinar flashbacks for part 2, Adolin is born, and it's this really cute moment where Dalinar realizes how important it is to have someone to not only carry on his legacy, but to have a child and to have a son, and he's just so happy. It's a really heartwarming moment, but then of course it's balanced with the next one where Kevlar sends him to patrol the borders of their new empire and push people back into their place essentially, and to fight people. So Dalinar spends 4 years there and like never comes back, and so Evie, his wife, shows up at the war camp with Adolin and Renarin, who Renarin he's never met, and he's like all mad that she brought their children there, like why would you do this, and he's just guilty because he's been hiding from them. That brings us to the conclusion, the epic moments of part 2, the ending. So Dalinar, as I had said, has been bringing people into his visions so that like Navani and Jasna can study what's going on. The big end scene of part 2 is that Odium, who I don't even know if I've mentioned this before, he's like the big bad of this world. Supposedly he's the bad guy. He's the opposite of Honor, who was God. But we're also noticing there's like a triad of Odium, Honor, and Cultivation, who is basically the Spren, or like the physical embodiment of Roshar, of the physical world. So we have her, we have Honor, who is dead. Supposedly he was God, he's dead, he was a Spren. And then Odium, who's like the bad guy. But he shows up in one of Dalinar's visions. He presents himself to Dalinar. He says, listen, I'm not as bad as I seem. I am literally the Spren, or I am the embodiment of human emotion. I'm the only person who cares about you and who cares about what happens. And he's like trying to sway Dalinar, but he also shows his true form, which is like this dark fire abyss. I don't know what's going on with him, but he shows up and he creeps out Dalinar, and then he leaves, and right after that, Lift kind of pops up out of nowhere and like tells Dalinar, wow, that guy's pretty creepy. He's like even more creepy than you. Until the very, very end of part 2 is that Lift says she's convinced she's gonna tell Gox that she trusts Dalinar enough, not completely, but enough to come and visit. Lift is gonna come, and I can't wait for her to meet everybody and just be her silly, unfiltered boss self and just be Lift, quite honestly. I'm so excited. I'm gonna go read and I'll update y'all soon.
Alright, second set of interludes, let's get started. First we are with Kaza, who is a soulcaster, suffering some serious bodily injuries as a result of using the soulcaster. Her body is deteriorating, and if she doesn't figure something out soon, she will die. So she is on a ship with a crew headed toward the ancient island of Amia, where soulcasters originated from, and she's on this journey to try and figure out how she can save herself. They are headed for this island, and there's a sleepless that pops up, which we learn the slightest little bit about in Edge Dancer, so lots of creepy, spooky, and mysterious things going on this island. We get another moment with Taravangian, who is experiencing a day of genius, but also borderline insanity, and starts making changes to the diagram, which we learn a little bit about in Words of Radiance, and his companions aren't super thrilled about it, and he's kind of just in this chaotic space where he doesn't know what to do next. Lastly, we get another moment with Venli as she's experiencing or witnessing this transformation where Voidspren are taking over listener singer bodies, and she learns upon confronting Ulam and the other Voidspren that they are actually killing their hosts, and their opinion of it, the Voidspren think they are meant to be grateful for this chance to revive their gods, but Venli is unsettled, to say the least, by this reality.
Hello friends, we're obviously back in the car and I'm on my way to Alexander's house to watch football, which is why I have my jersey on. Go Steelers, hopefully we don't suck today. Big week because I'm playing Alexander's team in fantasy and I must beat him because I talk so much crap on him. I wanted to take this quick little time in the car to update you because I am partway through part 3. So I've been reading part 3, really enjoying it. I'm on page 750, I think, roundabouts. So we're over halfway done, which is crazy. I'm flying through it. It's so good. So what's going on? What's happening? Dalinar met Lift, which is freaking hysterical. I love it. She eats his lunch, and there's just this incredible scene. The two of them contrasted because, like, Dalinar is so stiff and formal, and, you know, his personality, he's just very matured and old and straightforward, and then you have little Lift who is just calling him tight butt and telling him he's old looking and just saying exactly what comes to her mind and just being her silly self, and I love it. It's hysterical, the two of them interacting with each other, and like seeing Dalinar trying to like engage with her and trying to talk to her and like be normal. It's really funny. Dalinar is slowly visiting all the different places around the kingdom using the Oath Gates, around Roshar using the Oath Gates. He went and met Queen Fen, and he discovers his another power, which he can like basically he's a bondsmith, so he can bind things back together, like put things back together. So he is like actually physically rebuilding some of the buildings that have been destroyed in the Everstorm in Thalana, because it's like it's a coastal city, it's a coastal place, so it got hit really, really hard with the Everstorm. So they've successfully convinced Queen Fen to join their cause and that Dalinar is sincere. And then the next step was to go to Azir to meet Gox and Lift, and they do so, and Dalinar brings these essays written by Navani and Queen Fen and Jasna, and those are his way of helping to convince Azir to join the cause. Basically everybody else is in Kholinar, so Adolin, Kaladin, Shallan, Elokar, some of Shallan's like spy soldier people are on a secret mission in Kholinar. They're trying to take Kholinar back by getting the Oath Gate and figure out what's been going on, because Kholinar has gone dark. And so they arrive in Kholinar, and things are weird. Things are not right, and it's because another one of the Unmade has taken over the palace. So Shalin confronts the Midnight Mother. She is one of the Unmade. I think they're Spren, or like they're related to Spren somehow. I'm not exactly sure what they are, if they're Spren or if they're something else. But the Unmade are these beings, I think, created by Odium, who is like the big bad dude. They're related to his cause somehow. So there's another one, and it's called the Heart of the Revel in Kholinar, and there's this cult of people who dress up like Spren and are like worshiping the coming of like the apocalypse essentially, and they like have these feasts on the Oathgate, and they're doing a bunch of really suspicious stuff there. And Shalin tries to infiltrate the palace and is killed, but like obviously she heals herself with Stormlight, but she has to fake dead kind of for a little bit. And so there's something really sinister going on. They can't get into the palace, and so they're trying to infiltrate different areas. So Elokar and Adlin are kind of chatting a bunch of the Light Eyes up in the town of Kholinar, and like trying to get a feel for who can like support troops if they end up trying to storm the palace and figure out what's going on. Shalin is tasked with infiltrating this cult, and in order to do that, you have to like get their attention, and you have to bring food to like this feast moment. So she goes around as Vale and is doing a bunch of stuff, feeding a bunch of peasants. She's basically Robin Hooding it and stealing a bunch of food from the rich people who are hoarding it and giving it to peasants, and she gains their attention, and they just invited her to like a feast. So she hasn't been there yet, but she's working on infiltrating this cult. And Kaladin is working on infiltrating or learning more information from like the wall guard, the people who are guarding the wall from the Voidbringers, and basically they're the soldiers, the force in Kholinar that are still standing. And their leader, their High Lord, is actually a woman, and I think she might be a Radiant. I'm not sure. The very last update is that we got some more Dalinar flashbacks, and we figured out what happens to Evie, his wife. So Dalinar is quelling a bunch of rebellions in these outskirts, and he goes back to the Rift where he gets Oathbringer, and the son whose life he spared is there, and he's grown up, and he's like getting a force of people together, and he basically tries to kill Dalinar. He starts a rock slide, or like makes a landslide that like kills a bunch of Dalinar's men and topples Dalinar, but Dalinar survives. He comes back and he sets the entire city on fire. He burns it to the ground. But little does he know that Evie, his wife, goes into the city and tries to beg the people, like the monarchs of the Rift, to surrender, because she knows that Dalinar is going to kill them all. And they have a lot of tension in the flashbacks where she wants him not to murder people, and he is a murderer, and he's a bloodthirsty animal, and he loves killing, and he loves the thrill. So they have a lot of tension, and she goes into the city to try and plead with them, and Dalinar doesn't know because he kills all of the messengers, and she burns to death. So that's rough. It's rough. It's really rough reading about that and reading about Dalinar doing that, and just it's not a fun time, you know? He kills his wife on accident. It explains a lot, but at the same time, he's just like, he's got tunnel vision, and all he's worried about is revenge and killing and murdering and just being this animal, this beast of man. So yeah, I'm at Alexander's now, so I'm gonna go inside and we're gonna watch some football, chill out, relax. So I'll update you with more information later, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a taste of what's going on. So peace out, talk to you soon. Hi. I don't say hi. You gonna say hi to everyone? Say hi. Oh, you wanna give paw? Say hello, humans.
Welcome to my channel.
Milo and I are here on this lovely Wednesday evening to give you our updates on Oathbringer because we finished part 3, y'all. We spend a whole lot of time in Kholinar because we are at this moment where they're finally making moves to siege the city. Shallan attempts to infiltrate the Cult of Moments, I think it's called, and gives food to this cult to weasel her way in and become Veil and hide in there, but it doesn't really go as planned. It's really creepy. There are a bunch of people just overindulgent in like everything and just consumed by lust and passion and the revel this moment. There's people crawling on the ground, and she ends up just finding that this entire heart of the Oathgate is covered in like that black tar substance that the other unmade was made of. So she retreats and goes to find Grund, who is this little street urchin that she has been feeding, and they've been exchanging information for food, and she finds him, and he is murdered by this gang of people who has been stealing the food that she stole to give to them and taking it from them. And as he's dying, he tells her that he hates her and it's her fault that everybody and all of his friends died. And so she goes into this pit of despair, sort of, and shuts all sensory information out. And then Wit comes and is trying to console her and talk her through accepting all of the different parts of her as one part and being the Shallan that she needs to be in order to accept Veil and Radiant as part of herself, but also as like a level below real Shallan. In the meantime, Kaladin straight up tells High Marshal Azure that he is sent by Elhokar and Dalinar and that he's here to reclaim Kholinar, and so she works with him. They confess that they've been making soulcast grain and hiding from the Voidspren by putting metal, like basically lining the walls of this room with metal and soul casting in there, and for some reason the metal protects them from the Spren. Very interesting, makes me think of Mistborn. We're just gonna flag that because it seems important. So he convinces High Marshal Azure that they're all going to storm the capital, the palace, together, and they do that, and it goes poorly. They're fighting off the Voidbringers, who have decided at this moment that they're going to attack the city. They're like taking down the walls, they're beating the wall guard, and things aren't going well. And so Kaladin, Shallan, Adolin, Elhokar, Azure, all their men, they charge in. Kaladin escorts Elhokar upstairs where they discover his wife, who I think her name is Aesudan. I think that's how you might say it. Aesudan. I think somehow she has been possessed by a Voidspren. She's got the red eyes, and she tells them that she ingested this Voidspren and like she was continuing Gavilar's work and like a bunch of this really suspicious stuff. She's like leaking black smoke. It's not good. And their son is hiding in a closet being brutally attacked by Spren. So they save him, and there's just fight everywhere. Queen's Guard are fighting people because they're kind of possessed, I think, by her, and the High Marshal's men and the people Elhokar and Adolin recruited, they're fighting, and then Voidbringers are breaking in and they're fighting, and there's just a lot going on. And Kaladin recognizes the parchment that he was traveling with and that he got to know earlier. They're basically losing this battle to retake Kholinar. And then Mos shows up and stabs Elhokar. I was not at all expecting that. I really did not think Elhokar was gonna die. It's a really heartbreaking, difficult moment to read, and it absolutely breaks Kaladin. In the meantime, Shallan is trying to scare away this Heart of the Revel, the other unmade. There are two unmade beings of odium in Kholinar right now. It's the Keeper of Secrets and the Heart of the Revel. They have other names that I don't know how to pronounce. The Keeper of Secrets is trying to negotiate with Shallan and tell her that the Oathgate is trapped. It is a trap, and if she uses it, they are not going to go back to Ur-Thuru. Something bad is going to happen. So She scares away the heart of the rebel, but that was supposedly an organized trap, and the Voidbringers perhaps are working with them and made them do that to make them falsely believe they could escape, and now they're cornered sort of on all fronts. But Adeline overrides the situation and tells Shallan to use the Oathgate anyway because they need to get out of Kholinar. He wants to retreat and call it quits and revisit the situation from Urthru. So Shallan uses the Oathgate and they're transported to Shadesmar. And I'm so excited to be in Shadesmar again. You have no idea. I have had so many questions about Shadesmar, and I still do, but they are transported to Shadesmar at the very end of the last chapter. Everyone else is still stuck in Kholinar. The only people who are transported to Shadesmar are Kaladin, Shallan, Adeline, and Azure, and all of their respective spren. I can't wait to read it. I'm so excited. I'm gonna read the interludes right now, and then we'll get to part 4. Do you want to say anything to the humans? Bye!
Okay, lots of interludes to talk about. Let's get into it. We're first with Venli, and we learn her new form is called Envoy form, allows her to speak many languages, and cements her position as the spokesperson for this new generation of Parshendi, the singers, and we also learn that she has a small spren following her around that may or may not be a human spren. Not sure. I am suspicious. After that, we're with Mem, who is a servant for Mraize, leader of the Ghost Bloods, and we find out her apprentice is actually a herald in disguise, and this herald confronts Mraize, who entices her by saying he knows where Talon Ellen is, setting up some stuff that's going to come way later, but still very interesting. Then we get a quick 2 pages with Venli, who is flying across Roshar and remembering her sister Ashani and how much she would have loved it. Next, we're with Sheller, who is a light-eyed noble that has been captured by Herdazians that are threatening to kill him and give him the option to pick 3 ways to die, and he chooses to wrestle the hog, which ends up being this massive shell crustacean being in the ocean. Not really sure the point of this one, but yeah. Then we bounce back one more time to Venli, who's really internally struggling with the decision that she made to bring back these Void Spren and this new Spren that she has, and wrestling with these 2 parts of herself and not really sure whether the decision she made is in the long run the best.
Hello. It has been, I think, a week since I've been on here to update you guys. So it's been a few seconds for you, but quite a long time for me. So if I'm a little disoriented, that's why. But I tried a new angle because it is October and I'm so excited to dive into spooky books, but I have to finish this chunky monkey before we can get into that. But nevertheless, I have displayed my illustrated edition of The Ember for Christmas. I have my Sally painting up here, and I'm just feeling the vibes. But I had a rough weekend as far as reading went, and then yesterday and today I finished part 4. So I am in the home stretch here. I mean, like, look at this. I have, I think, 150 pages left. We're getting there, y'all. Progress is happening. Things are going well. I bought Rhythm of War and I downloaded the ebook for Dawn Shard, so I'm ready for the next step. But I'm also not ready because I'm not emotionally or mentally prepared for the last part of this book in any way, shape, or form. But that being said, let's talk about part 4. First of all, one of the standout things about this part is that we get some Zeth perspectives, which are these blue stickies. It's kind of confusing. My blue over here is Jasna and my blue over here is Zeth. I ran out of colors, sue me. But we got some Zeth perspectives, and he's doing like these sort of challenges, training with other apprentice skybreakers in the Pure Lake. He's excelling and moving really quickly, and then darkness comes back and kind of has a heart-to-heart with him, or like as heart-to-heart as darkness can get, and he says like, you're basically going to be the first skybreaker to swear the third ideal in like thousands and thousands of years, so like choose wisely what you're going to use to embody your passion, your oath, whatever. Zeth also still has Nightblood, which reminds me that I am 2 for 2 in my Stormlight predictions, because in book 1 I predicted that Shallan has a shard blade, and then she does, and in book 2, Words of Radiance vlog, I predicted that the sword Darkness gives Zeth at the end of Words of Radiance is Nightblood, which is Vasher's sword, and Vasher is a character from Warbreaker. So if you haven't read Warbreaker, first of all, pause this video and go read it right now. It was the first Brandon Sanderson I've read. I want to say Words of Radiance is really fighting for the top spot right now in my Brandon Sanderson ranking category, but Warbreaker and Words of Radiance are fighting for that top slot. So if you haven't read Warbreaker, it's a standalone that is going to be turned into a series in the future, and 2 characters from Warbreaker appear in the Stormlight books. Vasher is Zahel. I didn't realize that. That's kind of like revealed, I think, subtly in book 2, but it took me a little while to put that together. And then there's a character in Oathbringer, High Marshal Azure, is Vivenna, who is another main character, protagonist, one of my favorite characters in Warbreaker. So the fact that they are in this book blows my mind whole, and it confirms my theory that Nightblood is the sword that Zeth has. I feel like Oathbringer is kind of a slow burn, where like in book 1 everything is like WTF, because you're just plopped down in like one of the richest fantasy worlds there is, and it takes you the entire 900 plus pages to figure out what's going on. Then Words of Radiance rolls along and it's just action, plot twist, action, boom, 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 everything. And then Oathbringer is kind of like this slow burn, building on a lot of the plot twists and a lot of the info dumps and big things that happen in books 1 and 2, mostly in book 2. So you're building on that, right? And it's slow, but I'm still flying through it. Like, it's not boring. It's a lot of politics and a lot of political maneuvering. So at the end of part 3, Adolin, Kaladin, Azure, Shallan, Pattern Sill, and Adelin's sword Spren, they're all taken to Shadesmar. So Adelin's Shardblade Spren exists in Shadesmar, and it's a Spren that has like the eyes gashed out, and she's kind of like a zombie. It's really creepy and sad and weird. So they're in Shadesmar for the entirety of this part, and they don't even leave Shadesmar at the end of the part, and they're spending their whole time traveling from the Kholinar side in Shadesmar to Thalana in Shadesmar. They take a ship, and then they arrive at this city where Voidbringers and Void Spren have infiltrated Shadesmar and are trying to take over Spren cities. And then they are like taken prisoner by Honor Spren, because it turns out Syl has a huge bounty on her head, and the Honor Spren are trying to get her back and bring her back because she really defied a lot of tradition and a lot of the orders by leaving Shadesmar in search of Kaladin. So she's kind of like a runaway princess person in Shadesmar. And so they're taken aboard this ship, and then they're being hunted by the Fused, and basically the end of the part is them arriving in Thalana and seeing that the Oathgate that they thought would transport them back to the physical realm is defended by an army of Void Spren. And then in the physical world, no one knows what happened in Kholinar. They don't know that Ellikar's dead. They don't know that everybody else was basically transported to Shadesmar. They don't know what's going on. But what they are struggling with is building this union, this coalition of people, and Dalinar is struggling because he got all his memories back. He's back to struggling with, should I drink or should I let these memories consume me? The fact that I really sucked as a person. And then it all builds up to this moment at the end of part 4 where they're in this meeting and a bunch of information is released during this meeting. The first big piece of information is that these scribes have translated this super ancient text that's in a language called the Dawn Chant, which is a really ancient language that they haven't been able to crack, but they're finally making headway on because of Dalinar's visions. And this text, written by a Parshman, by a Parshendi individual, by a listener, and it is chronicling the invasion of human beings. So they're learning that human beings are not native to Roshar, that they came from another world because the Radiants destroyed that world with their powers. They come to this world and they're basically invading. They're conquering a native people, and it shifts this battle and makes them question what they're doing, because they're invading and fighting off a people that are completely justified in their anger and their waging of war. And at the same time, there's also the piece of it where the new Radiants, and Dalinar specifically, is struggling with the reality that the other Radiants broke their oath and surrendered this power because they destroyed their native land. So much there. Still haven't processed it because it just happened, but there's that. Also, someone releases a bunch of information about Dalinar being basically High King now, and Elhokar swearing fealty to him. They release information about the visions where Dalinar is engaging with Odium, and everyone is losing trust in him now, and the coalition is falling apart for all of those reasons combined. So things are not going well for Dalinar. I have so many questions, so I'm gonna go back to reading. I'm gonna start part 5. I already read the interludes, really loved them, loved seeing Rysn, can't wait for Dawn Shard. I'm gonna process, I'm gonna continue reading, and I will be back, hopefully in the next few days, with my thoughts on the end. I will see you then. Peace out. Good night. Sleep tight. Don't let the bedbugs bite.
Okay, last set of interludes for Oathbringer, and again we are first with Venli, who is preaching to her set of singers for the day, and is then informed that she's going to be traveling with the army for their attack on Thaylenah, and she is unsettled by that reality, for sure. Then we get our time with Rysn and this prelude to Dawn Shard. She is still reconciling, getting used to her recent paralysis. She is paralyzed from the waist down, and she's also still getting used to her Larkin, who she gets when we first meet her in The Way of Kings. She names her Churi Churi, and she eats Stormlight, so she's constantly sucking Stormlight out of all of the gems around them, and she's showing off the gem stores in Thaylenah when they are attacked, presumably by a fused who comes to steal this massive gemstone that is called the King's Drop, and she almost dies, and she and Churi Churi just barely fight off this assassin and protect themselves. Really great moment getting us ready for Last but not least, we're with Teft, who discovers that Bridge 4 has been attacked because they have been using this honor blade Dalinar gave them in the meantime to protect themselves while Kaladin is in Kholinar, and Rock and some of the other bridgemen suffer injuries.
Hello there. Okay, so you've already seen me and seen the intro, so you know that I'm obviously not at my house right now. So let me just dive right in to part 5. I said a couple clips ago that this book is very slow burn, and that is absolutely true, but part 5 is an epic explosion. This entire part takes up the Battle of Thaylenah, and it is just this epic clashing where the Void army, the listeners, the singers, they're now calling themselves the singers. They're like the next generation, next evolution of Parshmen, Parshendi, Voidbringers, listeners, whatever you want to call them. They are now calling themselves the singers, so that's how I'm going to reference them, so that it makes sense. But the singers arrive on the ships that they previously have stolen from the Thalanaw Navy. They arrive at Thalanaw, which is this coastal area. Let me whip out my map. So this is Thalanaw right here. You've got so much water around it. So they had a really well-known and well-equipped navy, and a lot of those ships were stolen by Voidbringers when the Everstorm came, or were stolen by singers when the Everstorm came. So those singers who had stolen all those ships arrive. There is an epic flashback at the very beginning of part 5 where Dalinar meets the Night Watcher, and in the past we previously thought that he went to the Night Watcher and asked for something, and that's how he lost memories of Evie and of his past. And instead we get the real truth, which is that he does go to seek out the Night Watcher, but actually what ends up happening is Cultivation, who is that like third person in the like triad that I told you about with like honor, odium, and cultivation, she appears to Dalinar. And it makes sense because her explanation is sort of that what she does to his memory is temporary. My understanding of it is that she knows something that's gonna happen, or she knows enough to know that like she's equipping Dalinar with this temporary amnesia, and in the future he is going to learn, and he does learn in part 5, how to cope with his past and the truth about him and the things that he has done. So that happens, but then the Battle of Thalanaw commences, and if you'll remember, Adolin, Kaladin, Shallan, and Azure are all still stuck in Shadesmar. So in this battle, Dalinar is confronted with Odium, and Odium says to Dalinar that he agrees to this battle of champions, and his champion is going to be the Blackthorn, which is this persona that Dalinar has cultivated in his youth and that he's been pushing down recently. But he brings the thrill, Odium brings the thrill, which is actually, we learn, a spren. Dalinar is fighting against that thrill and fighting this past self and fighting against the urge to be the Blackthorn again, because if he becomes that, he's going to become Odium's warrior, and he's just going to wreak havoc and bloodshed and turn on all of the people that he is trying to work with and work for right now. So Dalinar has this big moment where he has to choose. He swears the next ideal, and for him, he's a bondsmith, and his next ideal is that he is going to do better than he has in the past. He's not going to let the horrible decisions and atrocities that he's committed in the past prevent him from doing good things now, and he's also not going to repress them or forget them. He's going to accept that as part of him. In his spike of power, he unites the 3 realms: cognitive, spiritual, and physical. And he basically opens what's called Honor's perpendicularity, which is this way to travel between realms, between worlds. He opens that up and allows Adolin, Kaladin, and Shallan to come back into the physical world again. So they come stumbling through. Adolin has been stabbed and is like bleeding to death, so he really needs assistance, and it comes at the perfect time because then Renarin can heal him. And Dalinar is like, Kaladin, I need you to fight Amaram because Amaram swallowed the void spren that Elhokar's wife Aesidon had swallowed, but apparently it killed her. So he has one of the Unmade like taking over his body, I think like possessing him. So he's like, Kaladin, this is your chance to fight him and do what you will. Go deal with him. And Adolin and Renarin are gonna help get the other armies. Shallan's task is to use her light weaving to create an army and distract the enemies long enough to get the real army here. In addition to that, before Renarin comes and heals Adolin, Jasna finds Renarin alone in this temple, and he's like having a moment, and she is about to kill him because she thinks that he has been corrupted by a void spren, which he kind of has, but Jasna does not kill him, and that is the opposite of what happens in his visions. So Renarin realizes that his visions aren't necessarily set in stone. They don't predict the absolute truth in the future. They just give him these glimpses of possibilities of what could happen. So that's important because he then realizes that his dad is not going to necessarily become Odium's champion because Dalinar defies that particular thread of reality, that possibility. From what I understand, he's basically bonded to a spren of the Unmade. We don't know anything else about that. I'm assuming we're going to get more on that in Rhythm of War, but that's what's going on with Renarin. In other news, Jasna is an absolute badass. She is just wielding her powers. I don't even really know what she does. She can do a bunch of wild stuff. Lift and Szeth are working together because Szeth decides that he's going to swear an oath to follow Dalinar Kholin because he doesn't trust his own judgment after his past experiences with other people, so he trusts Dalinar. So he is, in this really strange twist of fate, bonded now his oath to Gavilar's brother, who he assassinates at the beginning of this series in the very first chapter, this prologue. So he is like on their team now, and so Dalinar is like, help Lift get this gem back because he has a suspicion that he's going to be able to trap the Thrill in this gem. Lift and Szeth are working together, which is so freaking funny. Of course, again, the contrast of the personalities is amazing, but it's just like this like Avengers Assemble moment where you have Shallan, Kaladin, Renarin, Adolin, Dalinar, Szeth, Lift. They're all coming together, these Radiants, and they're fighting the good fight. Jasna, Navani are in the mix. And so the end of the epic battle is that Dalinar traps the Thrill in this gemstone, and that effectively ends the battle for them, and Odium and the remaining singers retreat. After that, there's this rare moment of calm, and so the last like 50 pages, it's suspiciously calm, and I do feel like it is the calm before the storm that is Rhythm of War. Just a couple of rundown things really quick that happened after the battle. Venli may or may not be a Radiant. I think she bonded a second Spren. Not really sure what's going on with that. Moshe kills a Herald. Moshe is hired or like tasked by the singers in Kholinar to kill a Radiant, and he does. So he kills Jezra Ellen, I think is his name. He's like the epic king of kings, king of the heralds, and he kills him. I really have no idea the consequences of that. All I know is that it is not good. Adolin and Shallan get married, which is the cutest thing ever. I know that I was hardcore riding the Shallan and Catelyn train for a while there, and I still do think they would make a great couple. However, the flirting and the emotional and romantic growth that Adolin and Shallan experience in Oathbringer is great, and I'm so happy that they're together. And in the end, I really do like it. And I like that their relationship is allowing them both to grow. It's really sweet. And Shallan's brothers arrive at the end for her wedding, and there's this big group hug moment, and it's very sweet. Like I said, calm before the storm, lots of sweet stuff going on. Jasna becomes queen of Alethkar. The last two things we have to talk about very quickly. Odium decides that he is instead going to try and corrupt Taravangian. So Taravangian is now secretly on the side of Odium after he's gained Dalinar's trust, so that is incredibly foreboding. The very last thing, the wrapping up of Oathbringer, is that Dalinar has asked Navani to teach him to write. And in this world, it is not conventional, at least in Alethkar, for men to know how to write. They don't know how to read or write, and it is very unconventional, and it's seen as like a feminine thing for men to know how to write. And so the fact that Dalinar is going on this journey and flouting tradition like that and saying, you know, that doesn't serve us anymore, and he's writing a book titled Oathbringer, and you realize that that is what the excerpts from part 1 are from a book called Oathbringer. And in my mind, and I think Brandon Sanderson tricks us on purpose to think Jasna's the one writing it, but then when you go back and reread it after, you realize that Dalinar is the one who's writing this book, and it's just such an epic conclusion. That is the end of Oathbringer, the end of part 5, the end of this vlog, which I'm sure is over an hour long again. Thank you for sticking with me if you did. I really appreciate it. I know these videos get long. I hope that you all enjoyed it. If you did, please comment down below. Let's talk about the book. Let's talk about the series. Obviously, don't give me any Rhythm of War spoilers, but anything before and including Dawn Shard, it is fair game. Let's talk about it. Let's get into it in the comments. Thanks for watching this video and supporting my channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if that's your jam, and I hope to see you in my next video. Happy reading, happy writing, and happy living. Bye!